All right, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So I had an opportunity to watch the Luther Vandross documentary entitled Luther, Never Too Much. And as a heads up, I do give spoilers as well as my interpretation of what I've seen. So if you're one of those people who's like, don't ruin this for me, you're gonna tell too much, then I suggest you come back after you've seen the movie. And just save this to your favorites, and then don't forget about me, and then you come on back when you're ready. I'll still be here and we'll talk about it. Now I will say it currently has a limited release because from what I understand they're doing the larger release on CNN at the top of 2025, so there may not be a lot of shows available, so kind of hop on that like right now, otherwise you gotta wait a few months, but I'll still be here. So the documentary is directed by Dawn Porter, who I really enjoy a lot of her work. She has another documentary entitled Trapped that's really, really good as well. And so with this documentary, now I saw this in the theaters, right? Which was a fun experience as well. Like I felt like it was the cookout in the theater. Everybody that was in there, these are all people who are very appreciative of Luther and his legacy. So it was kind of like being in the theater with all your cousins and aunts and uncles, and we laughed, we cried. It was a lot going on in the theater, but it was a good time. And so with this documentary, where it shines, I think it shines in three places. I think it shines with the music. I think it shines with telling the story of Luther Vandross, and I think it also shines with the conversation of connectivity. And when I say connectivity, what I mean is, the connectivity to people within that place and time. So when people were going to the gas station in 1986 and pumping gas, is it Luther that you're hearing playing from the gas station as far as like the convenience store connected to it that's playing out of AM PM? Like, is it Luther that you hear? In the conversation of what was on TV in those moments, when Luther is performing at the NAACP Awards and he's doing A House Is Not a Home, what was the rest of America doing while that was on TV? Like that kind of thing as far as connectivity. And so I think this documentary does a great job of balancing all of that. Because I think when it comes to doing biopics and documentaries, especially on musical artists that have extensive careers, it's always a challenge to kind of get it all balanced and give people just enough of everything that they want. Sometimes there's not enough emphasis on the story of the act, or sometimes there's not enough emphasis on the music and its impact, and there's always a loophole. But I think with this documentary, you leave feeling complete. Now, they can't cover everything, because again, Luther had a very extensive career. Like if you're expecting to say, they better talk about when he was in Meteor Man, you're not going to get that part, right? But they will talk about, his journey of getting a Grammy and how many times he was snubbed before he finally got one. They will talk about the battles he had with his image in regard to his weight going up and down. There's things like that. But they're not going to be able to talk about everything. You know what I mean? And so I thought it was a great balance. And they do a great job of context and setting the scene, which is one of my favorite things to do when we kind of make our own music content here. I love, I'll spend 20 minutes on some context before we even get to the story. You gotta put the person there. By the time you're done with the context and the setup, it needs to feel like when you walked out the door, it's 1984. Okay, and you're standing on the sidewalk, and everything about 1984 is in your face. But anyway, to my point. So with the context, they do a great job of setting up Luther's origin story of what would be the tidbits that would lead to Luther becoming Luther, right? And so it talks about him being a kid in the Bronx and being excited to run to the TV and see Ed Sullivan because he knew the Supremes were going to be on. He knew the Temptations were going to be on. He knew Dionne Warwick would be on TV. And what I love about that is, well, one, it also highlights the conversation of collective experience. We've been talking about that a lot on this channel, where how I feel like when it comes to consuming entertainment, the idea of a collective experience isn't quite the same anymore, because now we just have so many options. When it comes to TV, you got a million different things you can watch. When it comes to music, there's so many choices. Things are different. All of America is no longer watching and being entertained by the same thing at the same time in these large, massive collective pockets. Everything's kind of spread out. But with him talking about Ed Sullivan, think back. This is back when there's only 3 channels to watch. This is before cable. Fox ain't even a thing yet. So when Ed Sullivan came on, it's kind of that thing everybody was watching. And so with him talking about the Supremes and the Temptations and all these acts, you start thinking back to what Berry Gordy and Motown were doing with their acts, as far as that machine, that assembly line, and what the standards would be as far as the Motown acts when they got on stage, and how they were always going to be polished and pristine and crisp, right? The Temptations were always going to be clean, in the baddest suits, baddest choreography. Everybody looks like $1,000,000. The Supremes, they're gonna have the sequence gown. Diana's gonna have one of the best wigs and the makeup and the this and the that. And even the choreography is very just, in place, and the vocals and all of that. So to see how that inspiration from when he's a child is translated into his live shows later down the line, where he again has that idea of polishing on the stage, where Lisa Fisher and Amy and Kevin, the three of them, they're gonna be in these top tier suits that are hand beaded and everything else like that. He's gonna have orchestra and bright colors, and he's gonna do the round stage instead of the end stage at his concert, so that way as the stage rotates, every single person in that arena or stadium gets an element of Luther where he's just singing straight to them, right? All these different things that he thinks about. And so, it's cool to see that. And so this does a great job of his early beginnings. It talks about his young adult years and how he starts to get into all these different groups in regard to singing and doing background sessions. He's in a group called Listen My Brother. And this is a group with about, I want to say 10 different, men and women in the group. And they're doing all this singing and doing different stuff. And they end up working on Sesame Street. Right? And in addition to that, while he was in that group, they also got pretty much tickets to go to the Apollo every weekend and see all these free shows. So again, getting to see all of his influences. So he's going to the shows, and Gladys Knight and the Pips are there that day. Martha and the Vandellas are there that day. Smokey Robinson and the Miracles are there that day. Stevie Wonder's there that day. The folks coming from Stax Records are there that day. Like, it's all these different acts that he's literally seeing each and every week. And so all of these tidbits are going to be the things that help him to polish his act as an entertainer, as a vocalist, when it comes to measuring what his standards would be. You're seeing Jackie Wilson on stage, so now it's like, well, I need to make sure I got some energy when I get on the stage because he has energy, and you're seeing all these different people, and so there's all that. And then with the group Listen My Brother, they end up on Sesame Street, and you hear even the origins of that show, and how Jim Henson wanted an idea in creating a space where there's diversity and a mix of everything, and sharing a culture with all of America that a lot of America may not have been familiar with. Like, people living in Kansas might not be familiar with the experience of what a Harlem is, and how the sets on Sesame Street were inspired by life in New York and everything like that. So they talk about that, and how even the songs they would sing, they weren't just going to do the regular alphabet. They're going to sing the ABCs, but there's going to be some modulations. There's going to be key changes. There's going to be a horn section, a dance break, everything else like that. And then they're going to break into parts. The sopranos, altos, tenors, take this part, you take that part. We're going to sing against each other. You sing on the ones and threes, and you sing on the twos and fours. And if there is a five, you find it and jump in two, right? So you have all that going on. And so they talk about that. There's a great segment that centers on the Philly sound, because there's a moment where Luther's kind of doing stuff out of Philly, but just talking about all the acts that came out of Philadelphia, and how Philadelphia, it was just this magical city in regards to musicality, and doing the comparing and contrasting between the Motown sound and what was happening with the Philly sound. So again, like I said, the music in this documentary is so good. It's hard to not sing along, right? You want to, but you're trying to be respectful of everybody else in there. So it was like everybody in the theater is like quietly like humming to every song that comes on. And so again, if you're a music fan, you will love sitting through this, just hearing all the songs that are being played, right? And so, they just go into that. And like I said, what I also love is they also have like lots of great like behind the scenes. Like, even the beginning of this documentary, it opens with him rehearsing for his Royal Albert Hall show over in the UK. Like different things like that. Just bits that polish, right? The meat was already there, and then here we go with the desserts and the icing on the cake. But anyway, so they spend some time just going with, his younger adult years. They talk about him working with David Bowie and how David was just impressed. And then David was like, let me start putting him towards the front. And David Bowie would literally let him have 20 and 30 minutes just to perform before David even came out, right? And they start talking about how, Luther also had another group he was in called Luther, which this was a quartet. And Luther would perform everywhere, the group. Right? And it talks about him working with Bette Midler and also doing a lot of background vocals and sessions for a lot of artists, right? I had no idea he had been working with Chic this entire time. All the music I'll be listening to, I don't know how I never even caught it. And then as soon as they start playing the Chic songs, I'm like, you can hear him right there. I'm like, why did I not know that? Whatever. But yeah, working with Chic and Sister Sledge and all these acts from the late 70s, early 80s. And then, they shift into a space where they talk about him doing a lot of commercial jingles, and how the fact that his voice was the voice of a lot of commercial products in advertising in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, if there's one thing that I wish would make a comeback, I would definitely say I wish jingles, like commercial jingles, would be a thing again. Between that and theme songs for sitcoms. Like, those are two things that I'm like, we can bring those back. That's one thing everybody used to agree on. Like, when I think of like the Mentos commercials back in the 90s, Mentos the Fresh Maker, if that song wasn't a hit, every time it came on, I would sing along, right? Or even like with the sitcoms and the TV shows, there's some shows I don't even remember watching, but I know the theme song like the back of my hand. Like Step by Step is one of them, Step by Step with Suzanne Summers. I don't remember any of them episodes, but I remember that theme song. I remember that piano riff at the beginning of Family Matters. Like that's a moment right there. Like that, go back and play that theme song. That used to hit. So guys, bring back the theme songs, please, and the commercial jingles. Right? I always think of Whitney Houston's Diet Coke commercial. That's a good one. But they just talk about all of the different things that they were doing musically, which was really amazing, right? And so then they also talk about when he gets with the group Change and how that kind of formed. So that's a cool story. And they also talk about the fact that he was kind of like a one-take singer. Didn't require him to be in the studio all day doing 50 takes. He'd do it in one and knock it out. And I think that comes from the fact that he's from that era where, this is before the era of a lot of studio help, where, a lot of these people were doing sessions with a live band, So it wasn't like you were just in Pro Tools and you sing and record and you missed that note, okay, pause, and you just re-record that note and keep going. No, you're going to sing the song all the way through. So I think a lot of the artists from that era just had a different kind of stamina and their voices were built different. That's why so many of the greats from that era, you hear them all. You hear all the stories about how they were one-take artists. Like Aretha Franklin was a one-taker on a lot of her songs. Whitney Houston, same thing. You always hear the story of her recording I'm Your Baby Tonight. And at the time, she wanted to go to the mall. So she zipped right through the song and went to the mall. And mind you, I'm Your Baby Tonight is not even an easy song to sing. Everything like that. Tina Turner, Let's Stay Together with her rendition. She does it in one take. This is just that era. So they talk about that. And they also talk about him becoming a backing vocalist for Roberta Flack and doing some shows with her. And what I love, too, again, this conversation in music, there's a segment in there where she's performing Feel Like Making Love. And you hear him in the background and the other singers. And it's ear candy. It is ear candy. But they talk about how she eventually lets him go because she feels that, you have all this talent and all of these gifts, but you don't need to be behind me. You need to be up front. You need to have your own thing. And I don't want to be that person stopping you from what you could be. So she kind of lets him go. And that's kind of what sets him up to start pushing for his own solo work. So there's lots of tidbits. Even his relationship with his mother. There's a segment in there where, he goes to college. And mind you, this is after they've been on Sesame Street. He's had some TV fame. He's been under the bright lights. Life is life. And he's in New York, too. But then he goes to the Midwest for school. And school is cool. But, after you've been on stages and every weekend you was at the Apollo and James Brown was on stage and Patti LaBelle and the Blue, all these people are coming on stage. And now you way out in the Midwest and you got to read a book all day. It was different, right? And so he was still a good student, but he didn't want to return to school. So when they highlight and showcase the story of him telling his mother that he didn't want to go back to school after the freshman year and how she was supportive of his dream, which I think for a lot of people who are creative, that's the thing that I think a lot of creatives just wish they had. Like that support from people that you think highly of. That's like the best thing you can ever be given. Like if you already have the vision of what you want to do and then everybody's in your corner, it just makes it easier. Luther was still going to get to wherever he wanted to be anyway. That was his destiny. But I think by him having the support of his mother, it's just like the green light to you go out there and you go be great. Right? And the mother understood because his father was into music. Now, his father died when he was 8, and I think she just understood that connection, so she didn't want to stand in his way, which I think is a beautiful thing. So then this is the part where the documentary starts to get into his music as Luther Vandross, the artist, right? And so, they talk about the origins of Never Too Much and how he had the idea in his head and he's doing a session and saying, like, I want the bass to do like this and I want the piano to do this and I'm going to sing it like this. And, initially when Luther was trying to get a deal, all the labels were saying no, even labels that eventually would sign him. But after he made, his session with Never Too Much, and this is why I say, like, in the world of art for creatives, a lot of times you do a lot of favors, right, for friends and stuff. You do a lot of stuff, where you might not get paid. Everybody just believes in you, and you're gonna make the dream happen. And when I get mine and you get your, we're gonna pay each other back. And so even with him doing Never Too Much, almost everybody who worked on that song with him, they did a lot of it pro bono. They just believed in him, right? And because of that kind of love that people have for him in his corner, they were able to make this great demo. Now he's going to the labels with this demo. Now, oh, yeah, we'll sign you. Come on, let's go, right? And they send it to radio. It blows up. It's massive. It's different for the time being. Remember, like, for context, I would say watch, like, my Janet Jackson So It Happened series where I talk about what was happening to black music after the Disco Sucks era. But like Never Too Much comes out at a time when R&B music was taking like a lashing commercially because of the backlash from the Disco Sucks movement. So then here comes Luther with this song that's so different because at the time, if you wanted a lot of commercial success as a black artist at that time and you weren't already established, you weren't a Lionel Richie, you weren't a Diana Ross, you weren't a Stevie Wonder, then your safest bet at that point in time was adult contemporary easy listening. I'm not talking about easy listening with some kick. I mean like easy listening, the song probably ain't got no drums on it, like that kind of thing. So then here comes Never Too Much, which is you hear that strings with the opening, and it's just like, oh, okay, I'm hit with this, boom. So it was fresh, it was different, right? And it explodes, especially on the R&B chart. So they talk about like that song, and they just start to kind of quickly highlight a lot of the hits. They couldn't get through every song because he has so many, but you get enough and you understand like what's happening. This is when they kind of do like the collage of all the hits that start coming out. They highlight songs like Having a Party. By the way, there's this clip that I love of, I don't know where it's from, but it's a school with these little kids that are dancing to that song. I don't know if it's like a graduation from kindergarten to first grade, or if it was just like a school recital, but it's all these kids in these nice little suits and everything and dresses, and they have a whole choreographed routine that the bad boy having a party. And the part that's so great about it is you hear all the parents cheering these kids on, laughing, clapping, singing along. And I think it goes back to the fact of what I was saying about that idea of collective experience. I think for a lot of people in Black America, Luther was in your household, right? If you're a baby boomer or Gen Xer, you probably made your kids to Luther. If you're a millennial or Gen Xer, you probably were made to Luther, or Luther was playing when your mama cleaned the house and had the music blasting, right? And so I love that video clip. I'll just have it playing on the side because to me it shows the cross-generational appeal of somebody like a Luther Vandross and what he means to different generations, right? And there's a segment in there where Jamie Foxx says, if you wanted to fall in love, you let Luther Vandross do the job. And he talks about how, when he'd be macking on the phone, he would just have the Luther playing and, he let Luther sing and get the job done. And they also have a lot of segments where they really highlight his stage show. And like I said, you can tell there's a certain effort into how he wants to do everything, especially even when we're just talking about the vocals and how he moves. Like when he would work with the session singers, when you had Lisa Fisher, who toured with him for 22 years, or Kevin Owens, who I think did 20 years as well, or Amy LaVere, like the effort and even just selecting the people who are going to sing with him, like paying attention to tone and texture, and can these three blend together? Is this person's voice going to be too heavy to blend with this person's? Is this person's voice going to be too sharp? How does this person's falsetto sound against this person's chest voice? Like all these different things, and how can we stretch and bend these notes and have you guys really go within the climax and the dynamic ranges of your voices and make you guys almost just sound like one distinctive instrument, the three of you together? And if we have additional backing vocals and choirs, how does this all work? And how does this work against the brass section and the horn section and the strings? And so it's really dope. And even with Luther's songs, which I think you really catch as they highlight these different songs throughout the movie, it wasn't even just about his vocals. Because again, he's one of a kind, right? But in addition to the vocals, I think Luther's songs work because, one, there's the lyrics, right? A lot of his lyrics tell a story. So it's the vocals, it's the lyrics, and it's the execution of how these songs are put out there. And then when you see it live, and it's even better than the studio version, you're like, dang, he plays no games, right? And so lots of emphasis on like the stage shows. And there's even a quote in there where somebody was saying like, yeah, there was no such thing as bad nights on the Luther show. Like you were going to get your money's worth, right? Because in addition, like he had them rehearsing 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And Luther, again, like I said, believed in giving people not just a show with his voice, but he believed in giving people an experience. So, I always say I don't know why I'm trying to say Aretha. Luther had a very regal experience with his stages and his shows. Everything is going to be pristine and crisp, and it's almost like the chandeliers coming down from the sky, and even the lights that are going to go inside the stage. He's not just using any old light bulb you get from Home Depot. He has specially made light bulbs that come from somewhere across the water, and even the finishing solution that makes the light bulb shine will be coming from another place. And then I feel like even when they put the light bulbs in the stage, Luther had them twisting them softly. Like, don't twist them too rough. This is a song about love. Put the light bulbs in the stage nicely, right? So that they shine and go. Like, I feel like that's how he was moving, right? And so, there's so much that goes on with the staging. And so I love that they have a good balance of playing his music, playing clips from all these different shows, and you get to see all the different costumes. Like I said, I enjoy seeing the clips from the Royal Albert Hall show when the background singers have those big green poofy dresses on, because it's like, okay, well, if we're going to do the UK and do the royal thing, we're going to really do the royal thing. Y'all going to look like how they did way back when the princesses would come down the aisle. So yeah, you're going to get these big old poofy dresses that almost look like a Disney movie, right? Pretty dope. And then, they talk about him remaking songs and doing songs like, A House Is Not a Home, or, Superstar. Ruben Studdard has a very good version of that song, by the way, Superstar. But even when he's on House Is Not a Home, and, Dion says that bit about, after I heard the song, I pretty much told him, you have just given me the definitive version of that song. Like, that's an honor. Like, when you cover somebody's song and they love it so much where it's like, psh, that ain't even my song no more. It's yours now. You can have it. You took it and did that, right? That's a gift. Now, the documentary isn't all whimsical and roses and sprinkles at the same time, right? Now, there are some elements where they talk about things that are a bit heavier, like his journey with his weight and his image, as far as kind of going up and down in weight, and sometimes those insecurities that take place, and how he often would use humor to kind of push through things that sometimes would kind of burden him. And so it talks about how, again, his weight and even his skin complexion sometimes closed some doors. So even when he was with the group Listen My Brother, it talks about how because of his weight and because of even him being a bit darker skinned, he wasn't always pushed in the front, even though he had technically one of the better voices in the group, right? And I think that comes from, again, that idea of just what happens with celebrity, right? And when it talks about him being an emotional eater and having issues with his self-image, imagine you're a celebrity and you go to these events, right? And you go to these events and everybody around you is presented to be deemed as perfect, or what society thinks is perfection. Perfect body type, perfect size. And even today, in modern times, I think we're living through that now with social media. Like when you're talking about something like an Instagram, we're not posting the pictures of ourselves when you done had a breakout and this side of your face done swelled up, or, no, you post that picture with the best light hitting your face and the best angle, and you don't put just anything out. You make sure that you look like $1 million, right? And so just imagine, in the same way that we can be very self-cautious of how we look, like a lot of us will take 1 million pictures and only like 2 of them, right? Or you only want the pictures that you took. Don't tag me in nothing if you got me looking crazy. So imagine you're a celebrity and people love your music, they love your sound, but you don't feel that sometimes you match what you think people are in love with. Like, that has to be something that's draining. And then when people mock you for it, there's a segment in there where it talks about, Eddie Murphy's doing his comedy set, and he says this joke about KFC. So Luther's way of getting his lick back, because he found out that Eddie was going to be in the crowd at one of the shows, Luther pulls this big, like, giant bucket of KFC chicken on the stage. Like, it's just very interesting. But so it jumps into, how he ends up losing a lot of weight. Like, he loses like 120 pounds. He slimmed down. And even with him slimming down, all the emphasis was still on his weight. And the sad part is, the very thing he was criticized about, as far as people thinking maybe he was too big or too overweight, now that he slimmed down, in one aspect, now that's the only thing people want to talk about. They only want to talk about the weight, not about the voice and everything like that, to the point where now there's rumors. Now there's rumors like, there was a rumor he died because he got too skinny. There's another rumor he had AIDS. And mind you, this is the era when, people were still skittish around the conversation of HIV/AIDS. There was still so much to be learned and understood. This is when, kids were being banned from school if they had HIV. This is when people thought it was still a death sentence right away. And so it's not a great time. And again, this is before social media. So a lot of times when rumors or things came out, it's not like today where things happen and we move on so quickly because we're in this era of information where things just come and go so quickly. People are constantly putting out new things and moving on. Even with social media, like people who are really big TikTokers, that have 2 and 3 million people that follow their TikTok. These are people who have to put out content like 3-4 times a day in order to maintain their audience, because if they take 2 or 3 weeks off, the audience goes somewhere else and finds other people, right? So this is that era back then when a story would hit and might not go away for a really, really long time. And so you're almost forced to address things that maybe you don't want to talk about because people won't let it go, right? And that was something that was really popular in that era. I remember T-Boz talking about that being a thing with her too. This is before the world knew she had sickle cell. And so the rumors were at one point that, T-Boz had AIDS, and that's why TLC was missing certain shows. So it's that era where, because information would somehow spread, and this is, we're not really on the internet like that yet. We're on it, but not really. But information would spread, and it would be really hard to kind of combat certain things. And unfortunately, you can choose to ignore it and let it blow over, but sometimes it doesn't blow over. So then when you bring attention to it to try to kill the conversation, now there's new attention to it, and they're like, oh, I never heard that. And somebody takes the rumor and takes it to the next level. So kind of just a lose-lose situation in some aspects. And then they also talk about, he's involved in a car accident that kills a very close friend of his, unfortunately. Like, he's charged, he pleads guilty, and the backlash of that accident and the stress of losing somebody that he was close to has him start to put weight back on, right? And he blows up, and, now he has to go on tour but he doesn't want to go on tour because he doesn't like how he looks. And they were getting ready to cancel the tour, and he kind of decided, okay, maybe I should be on the road. And the people around him were like, yes, you need to be on the road because this is what you love. This is what brings you joy. And like Luther was able to kind of bounce back, have this wonderful tour, have this wonderful show, right? And so it's that conversation of like fame and fortune. Like people love the fortune, but fame comes with a good and a bad side. When everybody knows you, everybody knows your business and everything like that. People, well, actually, I'll rephrase. People think they know you. People think they know your business based on whatever is put out there and based on, you know, what it is that people can grasp or pull together. And then new narratives are created sometimes. And so people have to kind of live in this world where, you know, I think we live in a space where everybody thinks they know all the celebrities, right? And so I think that's a challenge. There's also a segment in there that talks about the struggle to cross over commercially as an artist, right? And how, you know, he was nominated for Grammy after Grammy after Grammy and kept losing and losing and losing and losing and losing, right? And then finally he eventually wins one. And how he also wanted like a #1 crossover hit song and everything like that. And I want to say this about crossing over because somebody had asked this on my Brandy So It Happened video where they're like, why do y'all put so much emphasis on crossing over? If white audiences don't want to listen, who cares? It's, you know, if a black audience loves you enough, that should be good. It's not about crossing over to a white audience, but it's about crossing over to the fact that once you pull in a large enough audience and there's a large enough set of revenue that comes in, your label will invest more in you, right? Where, you know, if you have this record that sells 8 or 9 million copies, the label wants to do it again. So when you start this next project, they're going to make sure that, yes, you're going to have a bigger budget for your music videos. You're going to have a budget for your tours. You're going to have a budget for imaging and all this other stuff. We're going to get the best producers to work with you because we need to repeat what you just did. As opposed to, and as an example, like somebody like a Mickey Howard, who was an excellent vocalist, but unfortunately in her heyday, she never went gold. I'm sure some of those have been certified now thanks to like streaming and just time. But in her heyday, she was an artist that never went gold. And so because of that, the label's not going to give her the big budgets that they were going to give to a Whitney Houston or the big budgets that they would have given to an Anita Baker and everything else like that. And so because of that, when the budgets are not as big, you don't get the best producers. You don't get the best band for you might not even get a full band for your tour. Instead of that 8-piece band that you wanted, you might get 3. You can get a drummer, a pianist, and a bass guitarist, and you make it work. Right? And if they're nice enough, they might give you a click track so you can program 2 or 3 instruments as well. Or you might not get background singers. But when that project you've done has done the big numbers, oh, they're going to roll it out. Like even think back to freaking Michael Jackson. The label didn't even want to pay for the Thriller video, let alone the Beat It video. Like it's like, well, I'm making you all this money, y'all still don't want to help. So it's like, now you add the conversation of being a black artist, and then he was already pigeonholed into the R&B category, and they never would really shift him to kind of crossover because I didn't think about it because I'm so used to Luther just being such a staple in the black community. I never thought about white America and what they think of Luther if they are even familiar with his catalog like that. I didn't even think about it. But yeah, so understanding that, you know, when you're able to cross over, now you're a priority for the label. They're not going to half step and just half promote your stuff. Like look at what we just saw with Ari Lennox and what she's dealing with her label and the frustration she has. But understand, like when you've crossed over and you brought in that kind of revenue to the label, especially back then, it's a different day and time now because labels are kind of repurposed. It's not the same kind of industry, but back then, selling a whole lot of records meant that, yeah, we're gonna roll out the red carpet for you. And I find it so crazy that, you know, he never got that kind of crossover push because, again, if you can sell out Wembley multiple nights, I don't understand why they weren't pushing him on adult contemporary radio and pop radio and everything else like that, but pushing other acts like that. That's the sad part of the industry. But, you know, they also kind of bring it back full circle and highlight how eventually, you know, he wins a Grammy for one of his songs. They talk about how, like, there will be other songs later down the line that have a success, and he's able to still, you know, do his thing. But, yeah, that was a very interesting segment in the documentary as well. There's also a segment that kind of talks about his commercial decline in the 90s as hip-hop becomes bigger. And I think we've talked about this. It's either in my So What Happened episode with Tony Braxton or one of the R&B is Dead episodes from that old series I used to do. But just talking about how, you know, the relationship between hip-hop and R&B and how at some point as we got into the 2000s, a lot of R&B acts were not able to sustain their commercial success if they weren't starting to latch onto like hip-hop inspired production because the mirrors that once existed between hip-hop and R&B was kind of shifting in regard to power dynamics. There was a point in time where hip-hop and R&B could both exist together and still have their own identity, but eventually it was kind of like hip-hop started to carry more weight and R&B either had to fall into its same space or kind of be ignored. And as we got into the 2000s, you saw a lot of traditional R&B acts kind of fall off or get pushed out. And that has to do with just logistics, right? If you're talking about the 90s, the two biggest commercial genres were country and R&B. By the time you get to the 2000s, the two biggest genres are pop and hip-hop, right? So they kind of talk about that aspect. And then I didn't know that one of his favorite songs in his catalog was Any Love. And he loved that song because for him, he felt like it was autobiographical, right? And I love that song as well. If my two favorite Luther songs are Wait for Love and Here and Now. Here and Now specifically, because when that bridge comes in, when that bridge on Here and Now comes on, I'm one of those people who will watch a performance of the same song in 20 different ways just to see how he approached the bridge, right? So that's one of my favorites. And then Wait for Love, after I saw the live version at the Wembley show, the Wembley show where he's a little bit smaller, I was hooked. I like when he does the wait, and they just stand there and let the band just play, and they just freeze. Like, that's a great song, great vocal. I like the pre-chorus. I like the chorus. It's one of my favorites. I've always loved that one. I mean, he got a lot of songs I like, right? They have a segment where they talk about his relationships, which to me, this was sad. I didn't know he was never really quite in that space to find that person he wanted to be with, right? As far as like companionship. And I think that's sad because it's like, you brought so much joy to so many people, right? You were able to create the soundtrack to so many relationships, and there was so many people who were able to connect with those love songs, right? You know, everybody know you put on Luther. Luther's in everybody's love playlist. You know, he's in everybody's I want to be sensual after 11 p.m. playlist, right? He's in the playlist for the first date, and for his voice and the lyrics and the melodies to just bring so many people together, like even in movies, like even The Wood. Remember, the girl's favorite song was "If This World Were Mine," and she had her favorite part of the song, and homeboy got his dance with her because that song came on. Like, the way that his songs just connected with so many, I wish he would have been able to have that for himself, right? Because I think that's sad when, because I think everybody wants somebody. I think there's some people who are fine being with themselves, and they're their own best company, but that for those who want that companionship or want somebody to grow old with, right? I hate that he was never able to have that. So that was kind of sad. And then they get to the segment where there's a speculation about his sexuality or who he was attracted to or what his relationships were like, because it was like, oh, we never really saw you with anybody all these years. And now, when I was a kid and a teenager, I don't remember any of this. I never really heard these conversations until years later after he died or it had passed on. But how they approach it in the documentary is they pretty much use Luther's words. Like, they take a segment, because I didn't realize they were asking him this in interviews. And so there's one interview where he's like, listen, all I owe you is my talent, my music, and my best. I don't owe you anything else. And it kind of goes to like, I don't have to answer anything I don't want to answer. And he kind of leaves it at that. And then some of the friends that he has kind of talk about how they're a little disappointed with certain folks who kind of put information out there after he passed that they feel that Luther would have never shared in that moment if that was his experience, right? And so that was an interesting segment, but it also, again, it kind of made me feel sad when it goes to that combination of, again, him never being able to have the kind of relationship that he wanted, or at least that we knew of, that, brought him the kind of joy he wanted. Because there's parts in there where he talks about he wanted, like, love. And it goes back to the conversation of the song Any Love. And somebody in the documentary was saying that song was sad to them because people tend to want a specific kind of love, but he was in such a space where he would take any love, just somebody, please. And I was like, dang, that is sad, right? So it's interesting, again, how songs have so many different meanings and different variations and can be interpreted in so many different ways. Because I never listen to Any Love like that. I just be in there just singing along and just, didn't even think of it that way. And then they have a portion where they talk about, when he shifts labels, like he leaves Epic and now he goes to J Records, because Clive Davis has just left Arista, right? L.A. Reid takes Arista over, and now Clive has J Records with, Alicia Keys and all of them. And so this is when Luther kind of has the rebrand. He comes out with the Take You Out and everything, and he's finally got a big, massive hit again, and it's kind of like a resurgence of Luther. And, he's kind of slimmed down again. They still asking him about his weight, of course. But, man, when they get to the segment with Dance With My Father, like, that's also a favorite of mine. I used to really love that song. I can't listen to it the same way now because now my father has passed on, so it has a different meaning, right? It's a song that just, it hits you. But I remember one time, because I used to run a community center for 11 years, we were going on a field trip. I had the radio on. I had on Magic 102.3. That's the adult R&B station, right? And so that song came on, and so I'm just driving the bus, all the kids, I hear somebody wailing in the back. Mind you, I think we're going to the pool because it was like summer camp, and these are all little kids, like all like 12 and down. I hear somebody wailing, like boo-hooing. So I'm thinking, let me pull this bus over because one of these kids done hit somebody and we about to cancel this whole trip. And then when I realized what happened, it wasn't even that. What happened is there was this little girl who was like 8, right? And I don't even think she ever heard the song before. Like her parents were from Cameroon, so I don't know if Luther was something that was played in her house or not. I don't know. But anyway, she's boo-hooing because she was listening to the song as it played. And she had said how it reminded her of an aunt she had that had passed on, and it just connected with her. I mean, when I tell you like snot, I was just like... But it shows how music can connect with people, like generationally. Like I don't know if she ever heard the song or not, but I mean, clearly maybe not if that's the first time she heard it and it did all that. But like the way that music has a cross-generational connection with folks, if they can really just sit and listen to it. Because listen, the kids used to hate when I would drive the bus because I was never gonna play what they wanted to hear because that means they're gonna be about in the back making noise and stuff. No, we're gonna play what I want to listen to. So we're listening to old people music. So y'all sit down and be quiet, and I don't gotta worry about y'all singing along because you won't know most of the songs. But yeah, that was crazy to me. And even that song, like how I was talking about lyrics, that song, because that song gets me choked up too. But when he gets to that part where he says, when he's talking about his mom, and sometimes I listen outside her door and I hear my mother cry for him, I was like, ooh, that's a line. And then what got me, because but at that point in the movie or the documentary, eyes starting to swell up a little bit. His mom talks about how, because the dad died when he was 8. The mom was like, I didn't even know he remembered all of that. So that song connected with her. And then the line where he's talking to the Lord and he's like, I know you don't do this usually, but dear Lord, she's crying to dance with my father again. I was like, woo, Luther, you about to take us there. Like, that's a gift, right? Where a song can connect with so many people from that experience. Like, if you ever lost a parent before, songs hit a little different after that point. But yeah, that to me is a very beautifully written song. The melody of it, the delivery, the lyrics, and even again, like I said, the way he sings these songs, just gosh. I even like the Tamara Gray version of it. Tamara Gray that was on season 1 of American Idol, and then she had some guest appearances on Boston Public, the TV show that used to come on, and on the show she had covered that song. I even like her version of it. But that's a song right there. And one more thing on that song, even the line, because again, he's still talking about his mother. That line where he says, I pray for her even more than me, I was like, Lord, Luther, are you living my life at the moment? Because I know when my father passed, I couldn't even mourn properly because I was so worried about my mama. Like, is she going to be good? Because, I think as a child, we all expect to eventually bury our parents. But when you're an adult, you don't expect to bury your spouse before the age of like 60 or, like that. So I think my mom was 53 when my father passed. So, yeah, I was like, Lord, that's... I ain't gonna play because that's gonna give me my feelings, but beautiful song. Then the documentary goes back into the conversation of his weight, right? And the stresses of it. So Luther had gotten to a space where his weight was pretty balanced. He wasn't super skinny, he wasn't super overweight, but he was at a good pocket. But because the label really wanted him to kind of have this specific image to match the music, they wanted him to lose more and more weight. And then at the same time, I didn't know this, but he was diabetic. And so that yo-yo dieting just kept doing a number on him. And so eventually his weight went right back up. Right, the stresses of just different things taking place, and then they talk about him having a stroke and everything that happened with that, and they go into details of how his assistant found him, and how he had to go to critical care, and it's just tough. And then the craziest aspect is like he finally gets like this #1 on the pop charts with "Dance with My Father," and then he also wins another Grammy, and he's not even there to receive it because he's in rehabilitation, right? And I think the saddest part was all of that because it made me start thinking of Teddy. Right, when Teddy had the accident and then he was paralyzed, they showed this interview of Luther, and I'm just listening to a speaking voice, and I was like, you know what? I don't think he would even have a singing voice at this point because his speaking voice just sounded so different, like damaged, and I was like, man, his voice is probably affected too, and I was like, man, when your gift to the world is your voice, and it's currently not in the condition to share in the way that it has in the past, that has to be so depressing. And it starts talking about how he's just started talking about the end and everything, like he almost knew that his time was coming in. So that part is just really sad to me, like, and even when it like shows him after the stroke, and he looks so different in the face. It like he had just been through so much, and I'm like, man, that just, I felt so bad, right? And then they talk about he passes on. Again, people in the theater starting to boo-hoo a little bit because it really is sad. Like, I was like, y'all are killing me. Like, this documentary took you everywhere. It was an emotional journey. I'm also kind of a crybaby too. I be emotional now. I used to be one that had no emotion and you just stoic, right? That's why dating used to be a mess for me, because I couldn't connect with folks. I just be looking at you like you're crazy. But then once I started working with the kids, it made me softer, right? Not soft as in like weak, but soft as in having empathy and compassion and understanding somebody else's feelings, right? So, the documentary, just, man, when they talk about the passing, it was just so sad. And I think, especially as I get older, it really breaks my heart every time you have to keep watching all these people transition and pass on. Now, when he passed, I was a teenager in high school, so I didn't have the same connection. I knew of him. It was sad, but as I got older and had a bigger appreciation for his catalog and everything else like that, I'm like, dang, man, it hurts to kind of see everybody, right? And the part that I think of, too, there's a quote in there as they're talking about all these different singers that you kind of just know by like a first name basis, like Aretha Dion. But then somebody says, when you think of Luther, you think of love. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I really agree. When I think of Luther, I think of love. I think of all of these amazing songs and these moments that are just so intricate and sensual and thought out and have meaning behind them and are written from the heart, right? And with intention, right? With intention to connect people together, with intention to bridge the gap between two people who may feel that they have something for each other, right? That's a beautiful thing. And so the movie kind of wraps, and you know what's crazy? So the movie ends, they play So Amazing, and they have this part where it's like an a cappella version of it as well. When I tell you nobody left the theater until that song went off, everybody sat in there until the last note. And then when the last note went, it was like we were all just in there just in silence for like a few seconds. Just everybody just had to sit and take it all in, right? Really great watch. I don't have much else to say. I think I done said everything and then some, but definitely check it out when you get a chance. I love me a good documentary. I think this documentary, if enough people watch it, will be a great introduction to his music for a lot of people who may be unfamiliar. Like I said, the documentary is a good balance of the music, the story, and again, the connectivity to people and how it connects. And I think they did a great job. They captured just enough of his story, just enough of his music, and just enough of the impact and how it affects society. Now, like I said, they don't get everything because, they give you enough, right? You hear enough of the songs to recognize, like, dang, Luther got a catalog, right? He really had a catalog. And so, yeah, those are some gems, and those are some great records. So anyway, for those who have seen it, let me know what you think. For those who are going to be back in a few weeks or a few months, let me know what you think when you see it. But yeah, really great documentary. I'm looking forward to some of the other documentaries and biopics that are coming out. I always love, these are some of my favorite things to watch. So we will see. But anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.